right, welcome everyone. Is there anyone on Zoom at all? No. All right. So I just wanted to take a moment just before we get started, since it was an interesting day. If any of you caught it, just bear with me for a second. I said, before we begin, I want to honor the passing of President Jimmy Carter, a leader whose life embodied the very spirit, service, and community that inspires our work here on the Housing Task Force. It's fitting that as we come together for tonight's meeting to address housing challenges in our community, the nation earlier today came together to honor President Carter at the National Cathedral for making his final journey back to Plains, Georgia. His lifelong dedication to ensuring that everyone, regardless of their circumstances, has a safe place to call home is a legacy that resonates deeply with the mission of this task force. President Carter once said, "The measure of a society is found in how they treat their weakest and most helpless citizens." His work with Habitat for Humanity proved that this wasn't just an ideal for him, it was a calling. His example showed that building homes is about building dignity, hope, opportunity, and community. He also reminded us we must adjust to changing times and still hold to unchanging principles. So as we face our housing challenges here in Manchester, we must carry forward that wisdom, adapting to our community's needs while staying steadfast in our commitment to making housing accessible for all. So let's take inspiration from President Carter's life and legacy as we approach our work tonight and every day forward. May we bring the same compassion, humility, and determination that he so deeply believed in. So thank you to President Carter for showing us what service truly means, and may we honor you all. May we honor you through our action. Sorry.
Very well said.
Whichever side of the political spectrum you were on, he made a massive difference in Habitat for Humanity. And I'm sad that Cindy wasn't here for that.
Yeah.
But, regardless. All right.
Thank you, John. It was good.
So the next item on the agenda, which I'm digging for, is the approval of minutes from 12/12 meeting. And I just want to make sure that everyone got in the email. I'm going to add the link so that if you do want to go directly to it, it's in the folder. I know that was one of the issues that we had last week. So I guess I entertain a motion for the approval of the minutes.
I make a motion to approve the minutes as written.
I second that motion.
Okay, motioned and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That's 6-0. All right, so the next item is committee and subgroup reports. First is development and planning. So any updates for?
Well, we found potentially good news. The sewer and water line, I talked to the water and sewer department, and it is the correct size going up Maiden Farm Way.
Really?
Water and sewer. The only issue is, and Peter's working with Chrissy on trying to determine what is available at that pump station. I think we put in 2 new pumps, 1 or 2 new pumps for being put in to upgrade the system. But I don't know what capacity that system is currently at. Is it 80%, 90%, 100%? And trying to get some type of feedback from her as to what could be available there. Is it 1 house, 5 houses, 10 houses?
Okay.
So that would be a good start to getting something going on up at on the airport site.
Good.
We did have I know it's later on in the agenda about the, talking about the other places in town, but we did have at our,
There,
meeting last night, a potential buyer for the Crystal Palace came in and met with us and showed us a design of mixed use apartments and retail. And it looked pretty good.
I don't know, what is the I mean, I forget the square footage of that building. Is it,
I don't remember.
It's about 18,000 square
but
feet.
not, it's not a full, because it's more on the top and lower on the bottom because it's dig.
Not much
dug in
more, but
deeper,
yeah,
right?
it's on the top. It's about 15 feet longer on the top
Okay.
than it is on the bottom.
Well, their thought was apartments upstairs and retail downstairs. And I think they were talking about possibly 5 apartments in the.
Actually, I think they were talking about, because he spent some time in the office today.
5 or 6,
It's all,
it's all preliminary.
yeah, but he was, this morning, it was more like 8 to 10.
Or 8 to 10, that's even better.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, based on the square footage, you could certainly handle
There
that.
would still be commercial downstairs.
And then, there were just a few things that we asked questions of him about, the building height and the parking and all that. I think it's all things that we can work through to make it work. I know the select board's got a moratorium on this at this point in time on the, well, you know, on the.
Yeah, payment in
pay
lieu
for
of parking.
But I think that specific area, no matter which way they go, if they keep it expanded as it was,
That's within the region that would still be part of the village center.
it would still be part of the village center. So no matter what, I think that would fall under that criteria.
And excuse me, I don't remember what our current bylaws state in terms of parking for residences versus how does that equate for?
We figured it out. We came with all the numbers. I think in the whole scheme of things, he was out of 52 spaces. I think the lot had, I think he was shy 2, maybe something like that.
I'm not, yeah, I think that it's 1 space per unit. So even with 10 units, he only needs 10 spaces.
Correct.
And even, one of the proposals is for, he happens to have a relative who has a brewery, wants to do a little tasting room type thing. Even if he had 40
40 seats.
seats in there, that's another, whatever that is, 18 or 20 spaces. So he still has 20, 22 more. And remember, that entire area there was designed with shared parking.
Correct.
Because you've got polo and you've got the
To be
pinball and all these other places, and they all kind of share parking. And there are easements that express that idea that there's shared parking. So,
But I did, the reason I called Peter about it, because I knew it was on our agenda.
Mm.
And I just felt that a letter, something coming from the Development Review Board would probably be more positive for a potential developer than a letter from us, because we really, we're an advisory board. We're not, I mean, we
Yeah,
don't get the zoning. I think it'd be more beneficial for us to have a preliminary hearing, which we did have last night.
Mhm.
And that way there, he can get they or whoever it is can get a sense of where the board's coming from. Because ultimately, we can say whatever we want. We can say it's a good idea, bad idea, or whatever, but it's up to the Development Review Board to make the final decision.
Yes,
So I just think that was a better way to run it, but if,
that's
I
fine.
didn't want to
mean,
step on anybody's toes, but
no,
I just thought
think
that was.
generally, we could certainly express, I mean, I think as some of us have stated in passing communication that in general, we're in support of our mission, which is to support the development and increased development of housing opportunities across all spectrums, but particularly workforce housing and affordable housing with a lowercase a.
Yeah.
So I think that's, first of all, it was great news hearing that, because I know that property is set. Dormel, though, John, I'm sure you're sitting there going, where's my office going to move to?
I'm working to move again.
Right.
So
But
then this letter wouldn't come from us, it would come from
the DRB,
GRB, and that's the letter you were proposing?
well, that's what we talked about, but the DRB, actually, the zoning administrator has already written a letter
Right.
expressing some of the DRB's discussion. And as economic development, I've also written a letter supporting it from an economic development point of view, because it's critical to have something going on there. I mean, the number one complaint I hear from people is, oh, there's vacant buildings. It doesn't look good. It doesn't feel good. And so, and plus I think this would be a huge contribution.
Leon, could you close their door?
Yeah, sure will.
I mean, not to say that we can't write a letter, or
Yeah.
I'm not saying that. I just, it was my thought that coming from,
And the letter would be addressed to whom? Who would?
Well, see, that's the thing. At this point, it's not even under contract.
Right.
There are discussions, but he was really, the developer is working on reassuring his financial backer.
Ah,
That's the key
gotcha.
thing. And I think that's been taken care
That
of.
would be, as long as there's a, I mean, if he had approached the DRB or plan, even just walked in and spoken to Peter, and Peter was like, that's not possible. That's a nail in the coffin for financing.
I would say, Tim, if you could encourage him to do the 10 apartments up there, like 10 2-bedrooms it would make it, the more he has in that space, the more affordable they become.
Yeah.
If he does 4 or 5 apartments, it's not going to be affordable, but the price lowers as he increases the number. And that would be more beneficial to the area than, 4 or 5. So if you could do 10 with, maybe a space or
I
2.
mean, I understand that, but it is
Up to him.
it's tough when you get into a space like that, and there's a lot of,
Different windows at different
there'll be a
angles.
lot of investment in the property.
Yeah.
So it's obviously, as an investor, you can't,
No, I get it.
if you've got 5 million in something, or whatever the number is, I'm not saying, but with the total cost of the project, you've got to allow the investor to sell it and make a profit. I mean, they're not.
I understand that, but I mean, from our viewpoint as a town, we would benefit more from more apartments being there than just 4.
And I think ultimately, we would be willing to assist if it came to the point where they wanted to look at any sort of additional opportunities. I mean, just like the project that you've been working on the airport road, if the the P&L is coming out and it's working and everything, that's fantastic. If we can then come in on top of that and say, hey, here's some additional
There you go.
opportunities for potential savings, grants, whatever it means, it's not going to stop the project. It's not going to slow the project, but it might make it more beneficial or attractive for 10 units,
Yeah.
or it means whatever that means. That's something that we as a housing task force would be willing to assist. If that's something we could even signify that we understand that there's a, we could even write a letter for that.
Yeah, I think that there'll be a chance for that. I know that one of the issues, and Tim may know more about what the discussion was last night, but he was in the office for a long time today, and I couldn't help but overhear a lot of it. The big issue is being able to go up. You can't expand the footprint. So what can you do to go up? And there's kind of a false roof on there so that it appears higher than it really is.
Oh.
And if it's possible to go up essentially on the backside, which is not very high.
No, it's like,
From the front, it looks like a tall building, and that would probably not be touched. But from the back, it would have to go up. And there are rules that the town has about how high a building can be.
and that's also one of the more, Leon, I remember you discussing this in particular, the physical location of a 3-story building at like where the depot properties are, right? Compared to where the Crystal Palace is completely
It
different,
all depends on how it looks from the road.
right?
So from the road, if it looks like it looks right now, that's great. It can go up higher in the back. We wouldn't even see it.
Right.
And since the hill goes up there, the hill gets higher, that's not going to affect the landscape so much. But if they were to raise it in the front, that's a different story. So in the back, I can't see why the planning commission would say, oh, that's not our rules.
I mean, that is a unique property in that it actually it's one of the few properties that has an expansive front sidewalk.
Yeah.
Most of our buildings they don't have a paved or patio type seating. So that's one uniqueness. And given, your keen eye on importance of focusing on the downtown district. Even though we don't have a downtown designation, I know, but like to the core, that is one of the properties that is actually in the priority, like, there's no question about where that sits in our designations. So change, like, for instance, Act 250, I mean, based on my reading and the exemptions right now, a change of use would not require any changes, anything at the Act 250 level.
Right.
So, that's,
Are they aware of these designations and what they have in that footprint?
Yes.
Available grants and
Okay. Well,
all of that?
I mean, that's
He's a sophisticated developer
good,
Yeah.
with counsel. So yes,
good. Right,
but I think you're going to see market rate apartments. They may be small so that they're not, $1 million one-bedroom apartments, but there would be a mix of 1 and 2.
As we go forward, I would just make this thought and suggestion, as I mentioned in my email, which is, one of the things that, other than, again, as a housing task force, we're all about housing in general, but affordable housing is something where an area we should try to focus on more and more. Is there anything that we can do for that, let's say that particular development, where is there an opportunity to work with the town select board to say there's, and I've said this before, I was lucky enough when I lived in Boston, we had tax credit housing would allow developers to develop properties and offer low, medium, and mixed rents. This is a rent situation where, that allowed the developers to do that. In this case, where this developer, if he's looking to sell it, is there a way to give some sort of tax credit to the building, to the whole thing, so that it makes more sense for him to offer, even if it's 1 unit in the entire group that's at a more affordable rate with certain contingencies? I mean, I'm just saying, if that's something as a mission of our task force is to try to help facilitate those kind of things, those are kind of conversations that need to happen sooner than later with.
I will just say, I'm not a voting member. I don't have any part of this, but that is not your mission. That is not what the mission says. And so I believe that we have to encourage development, encourage housing, and development of housing downtown of any kind is important. The affordable question, which is far more difficult, grants or no grants, is different. That's a different kind of development. With these buildings downtown, the amount of money to fix them up. I had a long discussion today with a developer who spent a lot of time on the Depot Street buildings. And no matter what he did and the numbers and the quotes he got, and we can talk to a developer who's sitting here in the room, Marge, he said, I can't build these and charge less than $3,000 a month. Can't be done, just to break even. Now, you can talk about grants, you can say that there are all these things out there, but those are possibilities under certain circumstances. They're not guarantees. So I think it's unrealistic for us to try, first of all, we can't demand anything.
No.
And I have a different perspective because I'm economic development. I want economic development down there. I'm not here as a voting member of the task force, but I think if you go back and look at your written mission, it does not say you focus on it. It says
That's part of what we do.
including these
Part of what we
things.
do.
But including does not mean prioritizing.
No, didn't say it was a priority. Just said that as a task force, is there a way that we can make recommendations to try to help developers through the town?
Well, that's your interpretation of it. That's not what it says. So
So we just sit here and just go, okay, whatever, just bring in whatever development you want.
what if somebody says, I want to build, I bought 100 acres and I'm building a bunch of houses.
Yeah.
What right do we have?
I'm not saying we're gonna tell a developer to do anything, Gordon. I'm saying helping the town, meaning administration wise, zoning wise, whatever it is, if we can offer suggestions, and I'm sure again, we have a developer in here that help reduce their costs in order to develop a property, either future rental fees because they're not having to pay $5,000 a month in real estate taxes. They're only going to have to pay $1,000 a month. That could help reduce the rent costs. I'm just saying, not saying that's what we do. And Marge, go ahead and comment because you're out there, somebody who does this for a living.
And I would say.
Come up, this is Marge Pritchard.
Sure, we have a.
Step up to the microphone. Mark.
Sure. Margie Pritchard, we have a company called Dragon Knoll. We're developing Brian Thiessen's old buildings on Main Street. So we're new to this game, which is good because we don't have any of the baggage that a lot of the local developers have had. But the one thing I would say coming out of this conversation, if you're going to look at a particular property, and we'll say the Crystal Palace in particular, we've been having discussions about the Crystal Palace for 2 years, trying to figure out a way to move that forward. If you're going to have these kinds of potential incentives or softening the blow for developers, I would say you need to have what they are and keep the playing field level. Because if we're looking to make a move on that property as well, we're going to be disadvantaged if there's another developer over here who understands from the DRB or from the select board that they're going to get X, Y, and Z. So if you have things that you think you want to put on the table that to incentivize development, those have to be put on the table in my view, and they have to be offered across the board. Or otherwise the value of what we're looking to purchase that property for is going to be affected and we're going to be prejudiced. So it's
Marge,
just a
so
thought.
you're aware, we actually are in the process. Obviously, any of the incentives as of this moment, and nothing that you discussed was things that we'd even had on the radar. There are incentives through the state and our collective goal, at least the two of us, as well as part of the committee, was to take those and make them palatable and understandable for Manchester development. And that's a document that we're working on. And I understand it's not part of, it's including. This is part of it. The idea is that, and I think this benefits the overall economic goal as well, which is that if we appear transparent and open, and here are all the opportunities to make Manchester open for business for you, for that developer, for that developer, for that developer. And sure, you may want to go in. We can't stop someone from going in and saying, I'm going to charge $5,000 a month for it. It's just like we can't stop a restaurant from charging, $50 for a hamburger, right? Your business might go out of business, or you won't have any tenants for your property,
Market
right?
forces will control that.
Right. So our goal is absolutely to create the transparency of this. These are the opportunities. Now, what John number 2 or 3, there's 3 of us here, is saying, I think, is additional opportunities that other municipalities have certainly entertained, that I think it also comes, I want to say it like this, is that it feels like we have, because I've known other developers who've been looking at the Crystal Palace. I know developers who've been looking at the Depot Street project for years, right? And all of a sudden, it just feels like, oh, it's all here. I don't know about you. I know you've even made comments like things have been quiet, and then all of a sudden
Yeah, if things are ramping up.
they're ramping up.
I think it's because your brewery is coming in town, that's coming online, the new Christo's building's coming online. So there's more interest, because we hear the conversations, we're talking about them. But I do think to Gordon's point, the Crystal Palace and that sort of center of town is a little different than if we're looking at, because one of the reasons I came here this evening was I thought when I saw on the agenda that we were talking Crystal Palace, but it's also, I've talked to Gordon for months now, if there's land, where can we go in and we can build quote unquote affordable housing, because our business model is a little different and we may be able to do that. But I think those discussions and what a developer could think about doing that is a little different than someone coming in and having conversations with the DRB and the DRB or anyone giving the impression that there will be tax incentives or a sewer hookup, all that stuff, in my view, needs to be out there and needs to be available to everyone, so that even the purchase and acquisition cost, right, is going to be dictated by those incentives. So that's my sort of thought process.
Just so you know, at our hearing last night, the prospective buyer was here. we didn't give him any special
Oh,
preferential.
no, no, I'm not suggesting that. I'm just saying as we move forward, I just think
Well, if there is things, and that's when we get to the funding and grants, I agree that it would be handy for any developer. I know we've got a sheet, we've been handed around, we've had it, but if there's a way that someone from our board could say, this is what you're going to get. If this is what you want to do, this is what you could get. Because it would make it easier for the developer.
correct.
And I'm on this part of, I don't
Yeah.
have the funding I can't do it all, but if there was someone that could help on the funding end, try to explain to a developer, you're going to get $50,000 to do this, or you're going to get a tax credit to do this. I think that would make it easier for a developer, because anytime someone comes in, you can hand the sheet. This is what you get. You call the state, you call this guy,
Right.
they give you
Yeah.
X amount.
That is
Yeah,
exactly
and
what.
that's what we're working on, a priority housing list of
Yeah.
exemptions and incentives and that the.
Yeah, that would be
State
very,
having.
very helpful. I mean, we've educated ourselves, so we're pretty familiar with those. But again, to be specific to the CP, the question about whether you could go up in the back, right? That's a key point, because that changes your whole business model and your funding, and as to what your return could be on that property. So if you're building a model that's assuming that, based on current regulations, that you can't because it exceeds the height requirements, et cetera, you're going to have a different view of that than a developer who has been sort of casually maybe assured or told that, yeah, we think that that can happen. That just changes the landscape is my point. I do think that things are changing in Manchester. I don't know. I mean, we see it, we see prices, we understand how that's, working. And I think that's only going to, it's going to further it. More people are going to become more interested in this type of development. We have 3 projects right now that have our eye on in Manchester, and that's where our focus is.
As a developer, I would it might not be a bad idea just to talk to Peter Brabazon. I don't know if you've talked to him at all.
I've not spoken to people.
He's our zoning administrator.
Okay.
And I feel that as on that board, that it's always handy for a developer to come and talk to the zoning administrator and say, I'm looking at this building, looking at the Factory Point Bank, whatever. Look at this building. What do you think I can do with it?
Yeah.
And he can tell you, I mean, you could look through our ordinance.
Right.
It'll, if you want to read through the whole thing, it'll tell you what you.
I'm an attorney by life, so yeah, I enjoy reading things with a pen and.
But if you look through our ordinance, it'll basically tell you what the heights are, what the parking
Right.
regulations are, what you can have for square footage. And all.
That's what I'm saying. We have done that. We are aware of that. We've self-educated ourselves. And that's why when we look at a project, that's how we build out our model, right? That's how we build out the business models based on all those knowns. My singular point, and I'll let this go, is if those knowns are changing, then, and the town is willing to change those to incentivize builders, then that should be made known and that should be publicized, right?
I understand, and I think that's
Perfectly
part,
reasonable.
Just as a real quick thing, as a developer, you said you do some low income or lower income?
I mean, we're fledgling, right? We're 2.5 years into this. So, but we're local. We're total local labor, local supplier. My son and I started this company 2.5 years ago. We live in Dorset. We've done, I mean, like I say, we're a pimple compared to a lot of the developers in town, but we're scaling and we've been pretty successful. So we're pretty.
What's
big.
your, just, what would an estimated ballpark price, or you couldn't even come up with a number, square footage pricing? I mean, could you come in at 175, or you 275, 3, 4, 5?
I think that it depends on a number of things, right? If in fact, what we've done now with Brian Thiessen's old building, we call that Monarch Remain. That's our development. That's in the village. That'll be 4 units. We have done that, not counting acquisition costs, but just direct build cost, probably about 325. And they're really high end. I mean, we've put really high end finishes. They're really quite lovely.
it's next to Pincus.
Next to Venus, yeah. The 2 back units are complete. It was a barn. And then the front building, we sadly was not redeemable. We had to take it down.
Have you done any from scratch or just,
Excuse me?
have you done any projects from ground up to start?
That's, I'm building, Main Street,
Was.
So what,
Exactly.
and you're about 375 for that,
325.
25?
Yeah.
Including land costs.
I will. She's great. Her son and these other young guys are doing the work and which helps on that.
Yeah, that's why you can't do apples to apples. Our business model is different, right? Because we own our own labor. So our finished carpenters, our framers are ours. And they own a part of the equity in the company. That's the whole idea, is to give the young guys a chance to live and work in Southern Vermont. So we don't have the same business model, but if we went into a blank slate, and we've done this. I mean, we've looked at, okay, if we got 10 acres and we put X number of houses on it, how much could we do that for? And we think we can do that at less than most of the local developers, just because we don't have the baggage that they do. And we're also taking a lower rate of return because our desires are different, let us say. So yeah, but we're just starting out. Like I said, this is our first project. It's been successful, and we've been in the village, which is a little more difficult doing business in the village. So, but we're pretty happy with the results.
So the sale price on those units are about 325 a square foot for the sale price, or is that the cost?
No, that's not correct.
Okay, I'm just wondering what the,
No,
You know, I had a discussion again this morning with two different developers, I mentioned one last time, one from Greenwich, Connecticut, one who was talking about building on Nantucket. Both of them said it's twice as expensive here in Manchester as it is in Nantucket or Greenwich, Connecticut. Now, that's outrageous. It used to be half. Now it's twice as much. So that's the problem. With the incentives are great, and I would love to see some incentives. But the labor cost, they've got that, she's got kind of a controlled labor cost.
when we have to, I will tell you, just the difference from completing the back building, we call it phase one, which was the barn, from completing that to completing phase two, which is the front building, apples to apples, same vendor, same thing that we asked them to do, 100% increase. I mean, in a year. And, they blame all sorts of things, material costs, et cetera. So it's gotten more expensive, but again, our primary labor is our own. And my son jokes that he works for $6 an hour. So we're not going to get that anywhere else. So.
Came on. No,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thanks.
I did want to say that I think one of the goals, and it kind of goes into the net funding and grants and education all kind of combined, but I think we've discussed this at general levels, is we want to be use the mentality of what's possible and not necessarily what's not allowed, so that it gives people more of an idea, just like the discussion starting about, here's a potential property or an idea, a thought, a concept of a plan, if you will, for the airport road property, spurred an entire conversation that has really started to move the ball along, right? If one of the parts of the education / marketing / resources is understanding what's possible where, so that someone who isn't a lawyer, who might want to invest in the community, has the ability to literally, I mean, if you, let's say it was any of the properties that you've looked at and done your back of the napkin math on, you could say, okay, it was 123 Main Street. What can I do here? I can go up 3 floors. I can do, this type. Yes, it's all in that ordinance document. But if it's as simple as seeing it on a map, because we've certainly gotten much more simple in our overlays in terms of, like the zoning districts and whatnot, because I think there were at one point 3 overlays and 11 different districts, and now it's like 8 different, anyway, the point is having a resource that we can all collectively put in and then say, okay, on top of that, here are your state incentives that are available for this property because it's within the village center or it's here,
The
right?
location matters.
So Yes. And then, of course, I think throughout this year, talking about how, and one of the items that's on the agenda tonight, which is already a flutter on the internet, which is the discussion about the potential sale of the depot property and how that could be potentially used, or a portion of it, for incentives moving forward, ideas which had been discussed and floated in the past, on the previous sale. So, Marge, thank you for your input, and please come back anytime and give us more insight on how things are going. I appreciate it. Wow, that was a deep number 3.
Deep
Uh,
number three.
I mean, do you have any updates?
Oh, just to say, that, grant that I applied for, it was just a Google, it was nothing really long length or anything. It ended the other day, so I should hear pretty soon, I would think, whether or not we are in the running for that grant. And then I wanted to ask if we were going to apply for that Better Connections grant that Gordon, you put out there. It's due by, what is it? What? January 25th. You have to have an application and a phone interview by January 25th. And that's the Better Connections grant.
I have
We want to,
20 grants on my desk, and honestly, I don't remember that one.
oh, but you sent that to me, so that's why it's on this list.
Better Connections Grant.
Yeah,
What is,
What's the basis?
Through VTran and the
It's-
Vermont Agency of Commerce and Community
Yeah.
Development.
and it's a flexible, I mean, it's a broader grant than some of them, and it can be for housing in general. So I don't know if we want to get on their interview list or look at it, or because the deadline's coming up, that's all.
Better Connections Program.
Yeah. And there's 3 agencies that are funding it, VTran and I think housing. It's a combination.
I mean, I'll have to pull it back out. I must have seen it and thought I
Yeah, you-
should pass it
yeah.
on, but
Yeah,
it hasn't been on anybody's
No.
radar other than that.
well, because the idea, my idea was to plan some sort of a bring stakeholders together kind of thing and have that, use that money to plan a.
how long do these grants
Outreach
take to
event.
get? I mean, does it take a week, a month, a year, or?
Oh, it depends. Sometimes they're relatively quick. Sometimes they can be, okay, they're gonna open up. There's a grant that I'm dealing with right now. It opens up on January. There's these webinars they have about it, then they're due at the end of March. Then they might announce them sometime in July, and then the funds may not be available until the following year.
I mean,
No, the-
again, it'd be kind of tough if I was a developer.
Well,
This isn't.
This is-
This is a developing, this is a whole different.
But, well, with grants.
Yeah.
Whether it's a
Yes.
grant or what, that's my question as a
Right.
developer, or if we're looking for grants for housing.
Mhm.
How long does it take and how do you go about getting, I think that's my
Everyone's
question.
different. Everyone's different, you know.
But again, if you're a developer, and I'm gonna say, I'm gonna go put 30 houses
Right.
on Main Street. How much can I get? And if there's an exact number or there's an exact type, you can get, $300,000 towards a project, or you can get $50,000 towards a project. Or it's gonna take a year or 2 years. It's tough for a developer to try to say,
Right.
I'm gonna give you $100,000 for this piece of property to put houses on it, but if I can get a grant for $100,000 right away, then that makes the deal a lot sweeter, a lot quicker. But if it's gonna take a year or whatever, and you might not even get the grant, then you're kind of stuck with the number you're looking at, I guess. Just how I think about it. Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, the criteria for each one can be different. That's why this document might come to be important.
Yeah.
You could have deadlines and you can have,
And
it's a complicated
and,
bunch of.
and that's why I think I said, like,
No.
for instance, if you have a P&L and you've worked out your plan, this is what's going to happen, right? I'm sorry, a performer, you've put everything on paper, and this is your acquisition cost, this is your building cost, this is everything. And you find yourself in a position where you can make it work. That's fantastic. And you're lucky, I think, at this point that you can get that far. Then how can because we're looking for speed to market, right? We're looking for how quickly can we get housing out there? Yes, applying for a grant and relying on a grant for making a project work, it's difficult, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
But how can we reframe that discussion and say, okay, yes, this is going to work, but if we're able to then secure additional grant funding for, or help, I'm not saying we're doing,
Mhm.
if we can find opportunities for developers to say, here's an opportunity that we're willing to work with you and help you, guide you through the process, or put you in contact with the right people that could then provide down payment assistance for a property at $20,000 or 10% of your home. I know obviously VHFA does that, or, your first time home buyers type things, which is completely out of our purview. But how can you also make it even more beneficial so that if you had 10 apartments in the Crystal Palace at market rate and suddenly had an ability to offer an incentive to buyers or yourself to keep the rent payments low or whatever it is, but it's not going to stop you from doing the initial development because you already have it working for you.
But remember, this is a guide. It's
A guide,
not like
yeah.
these developers have to know enough to go to these places and keep up with it,
Right.
I mean, it's not up to us to hold their hand in the whole process because they've got to either apply or put their names in, get on their list.
But what they're available for is important.
Yeah, what they can do, it would be in here, but then there's federal grants, which will be in here too, that we're trying our best to make that part of this booklet. But remember, the 2-year interim, it's 2 years, so the grants will come fairly quickly for this interim priority housing.
Right.
The grants are gonna have to come quickly because it's 2 years worth of this priority housing project.
I think
So-
the other piece is that if there are ideas that we may put together and talk about and then present to other entities within the town as an incentive, like if it is a recommendation for use of the funds from the Depot Street property for something, whether it's a housing trust fund, whether it's a, tax incentive finance, whatever it is that we want to propose, that would be something that obviously would not necessarily be held up in grant funding.
Right.
'Cause
It's available, and if you meet the criteria and you can do X, Y, and Z, and you sign on the dotted line, here's $10,000 or whatever that amount of money is that we may have available. So-
And if you go back to what Woodstock did for their
Right.
10,000, I think they did a $10,000 grant
Yes.
for their AD,
AD.
ADUs. Thank you. I'm like, what is that? in other words? Yeah, so that and that was pretty much awarded pretty quickly once you did the project. I mean, it wasn't given right off the bat. It was part of the process once was complete. And then there were certain criteria that they had to continue to do. By the way, I just want to quickly go back to the Better Connections program, which was the initial question.
Yeah.
Reading it here, the project award decisions wouldn't be until March of this year. And then projects needed to be started by midsummer and completed by next summer. But it looks like it's mainly, and again, nothing that, I don't see how it's housing related. It doesn't read all the criteria. It's more about, helping revitalize downtown transportation, and, things with transportation in and around the town. Again, transportation is always great, but I don't know if that would be something.
Well, there was a section, as I recall, about housing
There is.
in there.
Really?
Yeah, it does actually state,
It's a tiny little piece of it.
It must be, because I'm reading
traffic
it.
calming, parking,
You're not
wayfinding.
seeing it.
Not what I'm reading.
Rehabilitation of buildings, redevelopment of sites, housing, land
Yeah,
use planning, and stormwater management. So it's
Yeah,
kind of
so it's kind of a
broad.
Yeah.
broad thing.
Anyway.
So you can fit it in there. So anyway, Gordon, if you want to take a look at that again. And
I actually, not that I want to steer this away from housing, there may actually be an important use because one of the actual stated uses, and this is me putting the select board hat on, is we're going through the budget and we were discussing ways in which we could afford the things that we need and talking about safety concerns. One of the issues that came up, I guess that I brought up, was the crosswalk near School Street. School Street enters and crosses Main Street. It's a blind corner. And we asked Jeff Williams the costs that it would cost to put one of those, lighted crosswalk signs that makes it more apparent that when I was growing up, there was a crossing guard there all the time,
Oh, yeah.
right? And we've had two incidences on that one spot in a very short period of time. That would actually fall under this grant as a potential for getting the
Fight
funding
over it?
to put in 20, I mean, maybe. I mean, it could be part of a master plan. So
Anyway, yeah, yeah.
I know you've got a grandkid coming up, so, right?
I got a call today saying, can you get here tonight?
Oh, my goodness.
But I don't, it might be tomorrow. But I won't be gone that long.
Okay, all right. Well, we're not stopping if you want.
Yeah. You know, I'm just going to bring this back up very briefly. Nobody even has to comment about it. It's super unpopular with certain people in the administration. But the easiest incentive that we can give is the water connection fee. It doesn't take money coming out of our pocket. It gets services they're going to be paying for their use. But you know, just as an example, and certainly Jonathan knows this, the brewery had a $200,000 connection fee. Now, so that's a commercial use. I think that's an outrageous amount. But new housing has huge connection fees just to get hooked up. If they pay for the hookup, getting on there, and then they're paying for their use, that's a big incentive that we could do without coming out of our pocket, that we could deal with. Now, the Water Commission tends to be guys who've been on there for a long, long time, and that's not the way we've done it in the past, and we've never done it that way. So they're a little bit resistant to that, but I believe that that would be good. And that's a way to at least provide an immediate incentive for certain development.
I agree, if it was for a certain,
Not for every development.
not for every development, but if again, if we're looking for affordable housing, which is, I think, our main goal here, all types of housing, but affordable, something like that could probably be a good thing for affordable housing.
Yeah, I don't even know
Because-
what the connection, if somebody were to build 10 units in this,
Well, and again, with affordable housing, if you can keep it perpetually affordable, and like my idea was no more than 3% per year increase on the sale price of the house. Again, if you went with Joe Blow down the road that wants to build a house and he's gonna build it for 200, sell it for 5, he's gonna make money there anyways. He's gonna make money when he sells it. So to give him a credit, I'm just trying to figure out how it would be fair, because it'd be tough. If the town did something like that, it would be tough. So, well, how come I didn't get that?
well,
You've got to have a,
there would still be that anyway by.
there would, but if you've got a good logical excuse or a reason why you're doing it.
Yeah.
I think that would work.
And it may be just that if you're going to build it something that's under 500 grand, you get this, and we'll leave it at that. I mean, I don't know. You want development, you want some housing. We need more Carlin Streets. We need more Green Mountain developments in
Hillville?
different locations.
I'm coming right back to the quote, as we must adjust to changing times and still hold to unchanging principles. Yes, it's not the way it's not the way we've always done it, but guess what? This document that I have right here that we've all seen, right?
Years ago.
1989, we're still talking about page 1 of the document that we still haven't really accomplished. And here we are almost 40 years later.
We'll do it this year.
We're going to do.
25, we're gonna be doing
You
it.
mentioned hookup fees, giving that as an incentive. Is that what you were talking about?
Yeah.
Well, direct pay, that's something new where you could get reimbursed for the costs of any kind of housing projects. And the municipality gets refunded money back. Direct pay, that's a fairly new
That's right.
direct pay.
Something
There you
we need
go.
to
So
look at.
consider that. It's on my
We
little.
might already have parts of the incentive
There
in
you
place.
go.
We just need to
Yeah.
make it known.
Yeah. Direct pay.
So, okay.
Anyway,
So in terms of grants,
we'll,
there is another grant that I'm working on getting the details for. It's small. This leads into the marketing side of things and resources, which is, John, you and Cindy, don't look scared. This is good. You and Cindy put together an absolutely fantastic summary / document of what needs to be done in terms of resources for our website.
Yeah.
For the town, to provide people like Marge the resources and tools to know where to go to get things. So it's been kind of a crazy holiday season, but now that piece, this grant could go towards the creation,
Yeah.
development of that. So that's on the horizon. I hope to have some of what you've put together with Cindy flushed out into more draft form of pages for a website before our next meeting in February.
Well, once it's on the website too, it was funny because my son the other night, pulled up something AI. I'm not a computer guy at all.
Don't rely 100% on AI, that's all I'm gonna say.
No.
He pulled,
Way over your head.
he pulled something up on that. He pays $200 a year or whatever.
Yep.
And he pulled up, he said, I want to build a 30-seat restaurant at Elm Street, Manchester Center, Vermont.
Yeah.
And it was all right there what he had to do.
Yes, there's a lot of, I mean,
It's-
that's
it's
my world.
It's pretty amazing.
So I'm a CTO of a software company and that's. that's
So
where
if
we
that,
work in.
if,
There's
if
tools
all the
like that.
town stuff and it said what it actually had something in there about, it was on the town website, but it was on maybe something in the journal or some unauthorized source that said the town of Manchester is working on parking regulations.
Yeah.
Change it, and it was on.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of stuff
There
that
is,
people
there is.
can.
We can have a whole conversation.
is.
It's
But whatever.
fantastic
That's just,
within
I'm just saying how
parameters,
cool
but
it is.
no, it's incredibly
And
cool.
if we have it on
Yes,
our website, then anybody can see it.
yes.
Mhm.
So the next item on the agenda, I misunderstood, the reframe systems, which I was actually excited to hear.
Yeah.
They will be, as long as we would like them, which I'm
Yeah. You
I
want to hear
think,
from?
I would personally like to encourage whether or not it's feasible in our community, if someone wants to bring an idea, we are open to hearing it, because we don't know what it could lead to and it's in its potential. So, a 10 or
Yeah.
15-minute presentation, who knows? They could be the next.
Yeah, so you got the information I sent about reframe, right, everybody?
So are they not presenting tonight?
Not tonight.
No, and I saw that on there and I said,
Sorry.
maybe it's just to
Excited about it
discuss it because
tonight.
I wasn't.
That's
thinking like
next
that.
month?
I was
It's going to
just
be
saying,
next month. yeah.
Find out when our February meeting
Yeah.
is and then invite them to the
Well,
next meeting.
I would love to.
So they would come to our next meeting.
I'm very familiar with how that process works, and I
Yeah.
think that's the future. Stick building
It is,
too
right.
expensive.
Right.
Beyond the stick building, I think I liked a lot about their model is that they could end up building a facility here
Yes,
that helps
The
the
entire region.
Yes.
entire, so we're bringing jobs to the area, we're
Right.
building a new industry
Yeah.
to our area, and also something that could, again, help with.
And
Yeah,
and
the
then a
mini factory.
developer like her, for instance, could come into that and say, I want this building, give them the plans, and they just
right.
build
right.
it and then hand it over and
Yeah.
she puts it up.
And they could
And it's a
build their
lot-
Make
little.
your son's happy if they're not $6 an hour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think,
So the
again,
Mini factories could be,
It's
thing
the
of
way
the
of the
future.
future. It is.
And
They
the-
already do it in Europe. That's how they're building
they
houses
do,
over there.
really?
and the benefit, I think, to an organization like this is that, even in just trying to look at my own home, most of these these companies are on the West Coast. So to find one on the East Coast,
Well, there's some in Canada.
they are, well, yes,
But they're not
right.
out here.
Well, this one is, so that's good.
So
anyway,
we'll arrange that for the
arrange
next
that for the
meeting.
next time.
And I'll, maybe we can spur some attendance. Thank you, Marge.
Yes.
For the next meeting. So the next item is discuss and review possible letter of support for potential mixed-use housing project in the town center. That's the Crystal Palace. I think we've generally talked about that in that we don't technically need to or necessarily have a place, but I think we should, at some point, at least my opinion, is that we should say that if they haven't already, here's the potential opportunities, not in a one-off scenario, but like here, based on, your potential use, there are some potential things available to you.
And there are other people looking at the
Yeah.
project. And I have no idea what
This is the only one that's come to the town.
Yeah.
So should we right now, or
I think
just?
we've already talked about it.
Yeah, I don't think it's
we need to-
necessary.
Now, what's the potential use for the, 3 town buildings, or is that not even?
It's being
open yet?
explored.
Mm.
Okay.
And there's an exploration of, housing at the back of the property.
The parking lot, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, like
What's,
the
what
Shire-
is the, what are the chances of making the upstairs into housing on those buildings and putting like, say, like a single staircase with a walkway in between, you can enter and go to the apartments?
Well, there have been lots of people looking at it and there are lots of ideas. And two of the people who spent the most time looking at it were out here today bouncing ideas around. One of the big problems is right now, even though I think it's wrong, it's in the flood zone. And if you're going to do more than 50% of an improvement on that property, you got to raise those buildings up by 4 feet. So they'd have to come up, change the kind of courtyard in between them, raise that up as well, which can all be done. And there was actually a specific plan presented by somebody to do that. But it's not cheap. Now, the more modest and more affordable would be houses in the back.
But if your house, the houses are upstairs, you don't need to raise it up because they're already.
It's, I totally agree with you, but those aren't the federal.
That's
rules.
not the way it works.
The federal rules will FEMA require it, whether anybody, I mean, you can go through a process to try to change their mind, but that's really expensive.
When you say a 50% improvement, so in theory, if you only improved the upstairs, because they're boxes, right? In theory.
Well, I think it has to do with cost.
Ah.
So if I were to say, as the assessor, each one of those buildings is worth $5 million,
You could put,
preposterously,
Yeah.
they could, put a couple of $1 million in there and it wouldn't be 50%. But the reality is they're not worth that much.
right,
And it doesn't take very much to put 50% more in.
Now, how does that work on it? Real quick on the assessed part. If you say, I mean, technically, what are those buildings? How many square feet are those? What are they,
Each one is
6,000?
about 6,000.
6,000. And if your building costs now being around 300 at a minimum, that's 1.8 per building. Right? So conceivably, and not to be, that's not what it's selling for, but you could say that this is the worth of the building. I don't know how that works. If you,
It's not worth that yet.
But the town, could the town state that since they own the buildings, this is what we value the buildings at? And then it could still be renovated.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know how that works.
All you're talking about is kind of gaming the system.
There you go.
And listen, I'm not above gaming it if it can.
But then they'd have to pay that
but
tax.
realistically,
Tax.
to do it right, they're gonna have to do some work on that. I think that everybody has been looking at ways to do the housing in there. But it's not gonna be cheap. But there may be a real mix. At the end of the day, there may be a mix. I'm really optimistic there's gonna be some good use of those properties. And there could still be 10, 12 units behind.
The planning commission's still eyeing that parking lot as a town parking lot, as one of our few town parking lots.
Well, it's under contract for sale, so we're not gonna have any. authority.
Yeah, it's too late now.
For the
21 more days.
For the moment, we're counting it as a town park.
It's 21 more days until the
The due diligence.
notice period
Oh.
has finalized, and then there's 30 days to close from there. Okay. I handed this out, so as part of the email and as part of our discussion last meeting, we talked about review and potentially approve final recommendations to the Planning Commission for Housing Development. Some of the things that as I was going back through them, some of the items that we discussed were not actually things, in my view, I may be wrong, that are things that can be directly addressed by the Planning Commission. So the ones that are under priority recommendations are ones that I believe that have some element of inclusion from the Planning Commission, such as reevaluating the village and neighborhood designations for growth, I did want to say that number one came a little bit clear in the previous, well, not, I don't say clear. So,
The other night with the. planning-
so with the planning commission, this is not to say this is what's going to change the town of Manchester, but the change in designations from our current village and neighborhood designations are going to be merged slightly. Not ours, but like in general, that's what the state is doing.
Yeah.
And one is, I believe, planned growth area and then transition. And that's part of a regional plan.
Transition covers a lot of stuff.
It does. I will say that based on if you were to take the overlay of our existing neighborhood with the quarter mile or half mile buffer and put it down on top of what was being changed, meaning it was being named something different and colored a different color. It's mostly all there. I think there were some places where questionably we may want to look at. And I think if we're looking at potentially advancing our sewage services further south on Richville Road, that does change what is the village designation. Personally, I believe that the outline, and this is not for anything for payment in lieu of parking or anything like that. I just think in general, if you look at what is deemed the village center, it's clearly designed specifically on historic center, right? Because the outline, and I don't have it in front of me and I apologize, but when we were talking about the Crystal Palace building, that's where the village center designation ends. And everything down Depot Street, down to RK Miles, is not designated village. Now, if you were to go and ask probably most folks in the town who don't show up to our meetings on a daily basis, say, can you tell me what's the center of Manchester? And say, where does it stop? I could almost bet they would say RK Miles, right?
Yep.
And they would say, maybe, I would say maybe even where Barnumville and Palmer House is, maybe up this way a little bit further.
Yeah.
And then, with looking at Bonnet Street, it's kind of like, once you cross the river to where the rec center is, that's it, right? And then going up towards the village, obviously it's still the center all the way up to the town and village line. So the designations or these housing, these new bucketed designations would potentially help development, specifically in the 1A, if we choose to go towards the 1A. And this is obviously way off the map on this, but if we chose to go for 1A, it would open up opportunity to allow for more local control of those spaces without Act 250 regulations being as much of a hindrance. So all I'm saying is that as we're, I think, looking at the, and this was something that you mentioned, something that others had mentioned, that in particular, looking at the airport road property. Like you and I have discussed, if we were like one more parcel closer,
It'd be good.
it would be within the neighborhood district, which would allow for those Act 250 temporary exemptions. One parcel. And it was funny, I actually did, with you, I did an exercise where I took map GIS and tried to, measure the distance from the closest point of the neighborhood district to the corner of the airport property. And we said it was what,
500 feet? No.
No, it was, yeah, I think it was
Less
six,
than a mile.
less, it was short.
Forget.
It was short. There was two different ways to look at it. If you want to look
I
at it at
zoned
the
out
village
at that.
center, the closest property to the village center designation is technically 0.6 miles, which is 0.1 miles outside the buffer zone. So anyway, those are the things. So if we can look at asking them to consider how we can adjust those to appropriate, growth in certain districts. In my view, as a person who grew up on Richville Road, next to the post office, where all of the properties leading up to the post office on Richville Road were homes. And that now you have a post office, the arguably one of the largest banks in Manchester that used to be located on Main Street. Almost the entire town dries that district right there, right? As part of the center of Manchester. And if there were designations that would allow us to say, okay, this is a priority place that we want to look at developing. The other thing is that within that area, there's not a lot of land that's available.
But wouldn't the priority, I mean, it kind of in my mind, if you're on, a priority place would be if you're on town water and sewer.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because why would the town run sewer to a place that's not a priority spot?
Oh.
Why would they spend the money? So
that's
if,
also
if
important.
anything that was on town water and sewer would fall in this category, that's how I.
And that
look
is
at it.
one of the top pillars for being able to
Take advantage.
take advantage of 1A, a 1A designation from in the new Act 181. So anyway, we don't have to dig into that.
Let me just say one thing
Yeah.
about that. If we were to, over these next 2 years of the interim building, we would have to ask to amend the neighborhood designation.
We
Right.
would, yeah.
So my question is, since the new board is coming into play in June, the new board?
Yeah, I don't know.
Do we have a period of time now that we can jump on it to ask that the old board, do they still exist, the old board? Did they get dissolved?
I think that's a good question. Whether or not there's an ability for us to actually reevaluate the existing, if they would even entertain it.
What do you mean, new board, old board?
So the new,
What do you call it?
Um,
The review board
the
that
review
does
board that
these
was just created.
designations.
Oh, okay.
Approve them or amend them, or they're gonna start a new board in June.
yeah,
The board that did exist, I don't know if they still exist, so, you
Yeah.
know that, Gordon, do you know?
no, I don't know.
I mean, it wouldn't hurt, in my mind, if there is a board still out there.
Yeah, go after.
It wouldn't hurt to ask that board, and if they said no or something changed, we can always ask the other board.
Yeah,
but
but we
it-
have to
it-
get this
it'd be-
done quickly.
It'd be worth it to do it sooner rather than
You
later.
Want me to look into that?
Yes, please.
Here's a hypothetical I have for Gordon. If the town were to bring sewer and water up to the airport road property and then turn around and sell the property to a developer as a property that's there for a development for a neighborhood, having sewer and water to it would actually increase the value of the property, and then we could turn around and recoup the cost of putting the sewer and water to the property through the sale of the property, and we could take that money from the sale and then dump it into the treat property, which is much more in town and closer to our sewer line. And then we could really put some affordable housing there. So we could use the airport road property as leverage to have money to develop. Was that something that could be possible?
Well, you gotta, anything is possible, but there are a couple of things there. One, I think that the idea that had been proposed was as those units sold, the town runs it up there, it would kind of repay the town
Yes.
the expense of running that up there. So that is definitely possible.
But now, again,
But if-
now knowing that the water and sewer is right kind of there-ish, there's one piece of property we have to go across, but it's there and it's the right size. The only difference right now, from my understanding, is the pump station on Richfield Road. Which really the lines coming from the town, it's the correct size sewer and water going up Maiden Farm Way.
It's actually natural form.
Or natural farm.
Maiden
whatever.
Farm, I think
Maiden
is-
Farm, natural farm, whatever, I don't
It
know.
is. But I'm
Natural, I got my head in the wrong spot, I guess.
It's not a very well-known brand.
I
I mean, it may be, all those things are possible.
But
I mean, I don't know whether Dr. Trudy's even interested in selling.
Well, I talked to him years ago and he said he would only be interested in developing the property if it would go towards workforce housing, affordable workforce housing. Because he had a lot of employees at the time who were driving from, an hour to work every day. And they would love to have lived closer and it would benefit him. He said, of course, he had talked to his father about it. And he said it probably wouldn't be all of the property, but it would be a sizable chunk of it. And that's a start in the right direction.
Yeah, all those things are possible. There's property right up, coming up this road where water and sewer is right there. That would be fabulous.
We
You
have-
could put a lot of units, but we don't own them and
No, the inventory. Weren't you gonna put together an inventory of all the land and property that the town owns?
we've done that a
We have
couple of
that, yeah.
times. I mean, I can resend it out, but we have an inventory.
You do.
Sure.
And,
Okay.
you know, just, I know that the sewer extension as was originally discussed or brought to the select board in the past. And by the way, I think there was the discussion of what that pump station, what capacity, because that was a question that was asked at that meeting. I don't remember what percentage it was. But
We'll know within the next week.
Yeah.
Chrissy's gonna,
it was, I think it was
So-
part of their presentation, but the price tag. And this was a few months ago, the price tag as it stood with the increased capacity with lines going down to Cass Terrace and then the question was whether or not we went with an additional pump station by Cass Terrace or whether we did some other configuration was in the 4 million range roughly half of that was grant. One of which was a surefire grant that we could get. The other was a very competitive grant that we may not, I think it was Northern Borders grant, I think
Oh,
What would that bring it down to cost wise?
2 million.
2 million.
That's if that was the entire
And then
project.
how many units would we have to build there to make it where the houses are still affordable, to cover that $2 million?
A lot.
100?
Yeah.
More?
With-
Yeah, right.
With all due respect to Ivan, who says this all the time, he says, you know, you got this one hard on your presentation, which is that, you know, just you'd have to increase sales by X to get
Yeah.
a small percentage,
Yeah.
right? To recoup it. So it's not always something to benefit. Yeah, I think there is a benefit to opportunities like that, whether or not the town uses it as a long-term incentive, I mean, that's kind of the idea behind. the
and what was the
project. It's in
rationale going to Cass Terrace? I'm not what's the rationale?
Well, if I remember right, the issue, going to Cass Terrace would also include Carlin Street. Because there was a place there to put the pump station. The issue, I think, came back to the fact that they don't want to operate more than one pump station because of the monitoring of the pumps.
Yeah, expensive.
So that's why they looked at focusing on one pump station with a different configuration. That's also where that was the evening that Paul Caraccio was there and offered to potentially pay for a portion or offer to, you know, if this meant his parcel of property could then become part of a development because it now was, actually, that's the one that's across from Green Mountain Estates, right? If suddenly his property has water and sewer available to it, then, you know, his permit technically is good. So I don't remember exactly the rationale. Again, it's after the budget, I think it's.
Well, but I guess the question is that if you're going to expand sewer,
Hmm.
then in my mind, it would make sense to extend sewer to a spot that there is no septic tanks or houses now, because that gives you the potential to build some, and again, I hate to keep putting the airport, but if you went up towards the airport, that's a piece of land that you could put a lot of houses on,
Yeah,
and it would make
the
the cost.
I think it has something to do with the aquifer protection.
it does.
Okay,
Yeah. So that's actually the next piece I was going to say is that one of the chief concerns is that most of those homes that are in that area have wells which are 30, 40, 50 years old. I'm
septic
sorry,
systems,
septic
yeah.
systems. That
okay.
knowing the importance of protecting the aquifer, they're,
That makes sense.
and.
No, that's,
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Um,
I was just thinking that if there's, if there's places where there's septic already, it's not like out there, we can take a lot and put 3 houses on the lot where there's already a house, that probably won't happen.
right.
It just makes sense to go the other way. If it's for the aquifer protection, that makes sense.
Yeah, and
That's-
especially with the propensity of flooding in that region.
Yep, no,
It's
that's,
something we absolutely don't want.
Well, that's uphill, so that area.
The airport is, but you
Yeah.
know, like, I mean, the potential of the Hayes property. I mean, we've seen the water
Yeah,
come
yeah.
right over the top of those berms, so.
You know, can I just make one comment on the
Yeah.
priority before we lose
Yeah.
time? I know quickly, the ADU is briefly discussed on non-residents, on non-primary residents extended, and I don't see that in anywhere in the priority. Maybe if we could, I mean, Leon,
Yeah,
what was
I-
your thought on
Well,
that?
I think I brought it up at the,
You're right.
You did bring it
planning
up.
commission meeting, but we're so involved in the town plan right now.
Yeah, I figure, but I mean, as far as a priority, because that's such a
right.
simple no-brainer.
Simple no-brainer.
It's a simple no-brainer
And
that
of
could
course, we-
open that up.
And I think everybody, and I'm not speaking myself personally, but I'm pretty sure most people on the planning commission would say, yeah, let's fix this. But then it would have to go before the select. board. So
understand.
it would be up to Jonathan to approve it.
Right,
Don't just say me.
but I just don't see where the
I wanna hear
line,
that.
something like
Call
that.
me.
That's low line.
You're
fruit
right, and I
there.
think when putting in my notes, I put it under the general municipality recommendations, because there's 2 mentions of ADUs there. For tax incentives, but also I do understand the options. And is it 30%?
For the ADU size?
Yeah.
I know it's that way in Bennington. I'm not sure about Manchester.
I
I think
mean,
it was 90, I think it was 900 square feet or 30%, whichever.
30%, whichever is
Is
larger,
is
greater.
Greater,
So if you've got a giant house, your 30% could be
greater than
having
9.
2,000 square foot ADU.
Right.
all right.
And then on back to the affordability, do we give? And I don't know if we can legally, but can you give? If you're going to have an ADU or if we're going to give an incentive for an ADU, could we require that it's an affordable rental price? I don't know.
The state will give you 50,000 towards it if you promise to rent it to a.
The state will, but if we as a town
Yes, we can also.
are
apply.
allowing more density, more development, can we require it that it be affordable? I don't know.
Oh, we probably could.
Well, and that, by the way, that the only piece, and I don't want to sound like Debbie Downer here, but now that I'm looking at number 3 and short-term rentals, knowing that there's a potential for 10 units of apartment housing in the center of Manchester, what do we have to say that that's not going to become short-term rentals? And right now we have nothing. Right?
You know, and could the building owner then, you know.
I mean, it'd be very lucrative to anyone walking in there.
lucrative, like,
Can you buy it as a second home?
Basically, you can turn it into a hotel.
Yeah.
In the middle of town.
There you
Well,
go.
it's not
I
apartment.
think you introduce, like you said, number 3, I mean, if it gets passed, then, well, it'll take a while for that to get passed, I assume, but.
That's going to take a lot of discussion, but I
Yeah.
think, knowing, just, I mean, cold numbers. And I'm not saying that they have benefit, they have a place in our community, and that's fantastic. But just the numbers alone, we have a target of 200 homes for the next 6 years, and we have 200. Now, 7.7% of our housing stock is now
Yeah, I have
aged,
over and
STRs.
over for like the past 3 or 4 years, I have been pushing it to make a registration. And we give out a limited number of licenses for short-term rentals. That way we don't have 7% of our housing stock. Instead, we have 2%. Something that's more accommodating to our population size.
Interesting enough, I was on AirDNA the other day, just
Did it go
earlier
up
this
again?
week. It said they had 315 listings.
Yeah. And
So
that-
that's gone up because it was at 270.
Yeah.
When I looked
And
at
we
it.
should
with
have
August
100.
numbers.
Not 300.
So an interesting thing is that in our discussion last meeting, I mentioned that the advisement that the town's attorney had said to, I believe, the planning commission was that short-term rentals, you shouldn't, there's nothing we should be doing about, like, there was some, it's based on like precedent that the short-term rental regulations were not standing. And
But
at the last, Burlington, however, it's going to the Supreme Court.
Yes, but they're gonna lose in Supreme Court too, because their
Yeah.
case is too strong.
So, I think it's definitely something that we need to put a harness on, and if we can figure out innovative ways to make sure that great intending people don't make a problem even worse, I think that that's something we need to definitely address. I'm gonna say, in the interest of time, I would like to talk to each of you individually on this and kind of fine tune them, not tonight.
Mhm.
We'll have individual calls and whatnot and kind of discuss this. And at our next meeting, we'll have a final draft that we'll then present. Because I mean,
Well, what is your next meeting?
February,
Our next planning commission meeting is January
oh, it is, right?
21st, I believe, but I won't be there. I'll be free.
I mean, it'd be nice if, I don't know what you've got planned for your meeting, but if we all kind of agreed as a starting point,
Yeah,
this is a good idea. We might want to at least get this to them to have them start working on something.
Jonathan knows one of the other members, if you can probably pass it on.
yeah, no, I will, I think that's fine. I think the only
'Cause if
concern
we
I have
keep
is
pushing
that.
stuff down and down and
Sure.
down.
Oh, yeah,
it'll-
yeah. No.
That's
The
good
only
next year
concern
before we
I
get to
have
it.
is that we can hand it, but it will not be looked at for the next.
Well, we can hand it to them, but if we, then they would get it on the schedule, or I'm a vice chair of the planning commission. I can call Wilbur and say, hey, can you put this on the thing? If you get it to me soon.
Which Wilbur did say he
I'll
wanted.
get it onto the
But
agenda for the next meeting.
I think that's before.
All we need is a week
Conference.
advance,
Okay.
so.
I'm gonna table discussion for the Depot Street property sale funds. Marge, do you have anything else that you would like to say?
No.
Okay.
Enjoy yourself.
So I did have one other item on here that I did talk to another member about, and that is just in general. We're meeting generally on a cadence now of once a month. And there are still a lot of work that can be done on the back end. And just the suggestion within the groups to potentially look at working on a off cycle. So if we're meeting the first week of the month, on the third week of the month, if your group could get together so that we're at least continuing the pace faster than waiting the month before we come back. I also need to check, and Gordon, maybe you know this, or Tim as a chair of the DRB, if we have members of the committee of the two subcommittees. So let's say funding and grants and education and marketing. So say it's John, myself, Joanne, and Cindy, which technically presents a quorum.
Mhm.
But we do it as a public meeting, as a subcommittee meeting. We still have to put it out there. Still have to have a Zoom. I don't know if there's any. I know I'm trying to embrace the fact that we're getting together again, but it's just the four of us. It's not the full, and the focus is solely on grants, marketing, and resources.
There's still business and you still have a majority of, you've got a quorum.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I think, we were just looking at the open meeting rules this morning. I think you have to say that's a public meeting.
Yeah.
oh, it would definitely be a public meeting, but do we just bill it solely as a
Subcommittee.
subcommittee meeting?
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
I think that's fine. Just that you have to at least,
And if you had 3 or less, does it make it? Do you still have, is that
No.
still considered a quorum?
no, it's not. Because a quorum would be 4 or more.
So reduce the subcommittee to 3 people. So sorry, I don't mean to,
There you go.
I mean,
Well, in this case, it would.
Don't
be
make it too
subcommittees.
complicated.
Okay,
We're just an advisory committee.
but it still has to follow open
Right.
meeting laws.
Yeah.
Okay.
and not to be deceptive in any way, shape. or
No,
form.
Yeah.
I mean, what those subcommittees are doing as well is just coming forth in the bigger, larger group and sharing
What they
ideas and thoughts.
talk about.
Nothing is,
Right.
voted on or decided on by those subcommittees.
Right. Yeah. I will get
So
clarified.
we could just get together, have a beer and talk about it.
Okay, and then the last item here is, I had originally put down the 6th as the next meeting. Based on how everything's been stacking up with every month, I'm asking if we can move it to the 13th, which is middle of the month.
That's better because I have planning commission meetings always in that same week as
Yes.
this meeting. It's like 2 meetings in a week.
I know you probably had DRB meetings that week, but,
Yes.
Then it's doubling up for 10.
yeah, I'm actually,
Middle of the month makes it easier because we're always the first,
Right.
ours is the first Wednesday.
okay. All right, so so are we good for February 13th, 5:30 to 7 here?
Mhm.
Okay. And then just, potential item for next month, and I know this is more general, there's some great work being done with Fair Housing Month here in the state of Vermont, and it's the month of April. And there is an organization in Burlington that works together with a lot of the BHFA and some of the other state non-governmental organizations to put together awareness opportunities to work with developers. I mean, it just might be an interesting time to have some resources and materials available for the community. Here's the rollout, and use that as a backdrop. So, anything else? Congratulations in advance,
Advance of what?
grandkid.
Oh.
Is it a
here
first?
or not?
No, it's second.
Oh,
Won't be as
Right.
spoiled.
Is it here or no?
No, down in DC. But,
Any day now, kind of thing?
Like tonight.
like,
Tonight?
well, it might more likely be tomorrow.
Okay. All
I
right,
move to adjourn the meeting.
Congratulations.
I'll second that.
Adjourn the
All right.
meeting?
everyone,
Yeah, I
thank you
agree.
very much.
Hey.
Thank you.
Driving down tonight, Gordon?
No, I wouldn't go until the morning. I'll find out. See, my role is to take care of the other, the almost 3-year-old. I mean,
Right.
I can send down Henry for some company.
well, that's his name is Henry.
Oh, no kidding? That's my 3-year-old too.
Oh,